Namaskar, hello and a very warm welcome viewers. You're watching Bills and Insight, your one-stop destination for views, news and analysis of proposed legislations of India that have far-reaching implications and impact your life. I'm your host Kriti Mishra, and today the spotlight is on the Surrogacy Regulation Act of 2021. President Ramnath Kovind has given his assent to Surrogacy Regulation Bill, which was passed by Parliament during the last winter session. The Act defines surrogacy as a practice where a woman gives birth to a child for an intending couple with the intention to hand over the child after the birth. Before the detailed analysis, let's take a look at the highlights of the Act. The Act prohibits commercial surrogacy but allows altruistic surrogacy. The intending couple should have a certificate of essentiality and a certificate of eligibility issued by the appropriate authority. The central and the state governments shall constitute the National Surrogacy Board and the State Surrogacy Boards, respectively. So what is surrogacy and how will this Act regulate surrogacy in our country? Well, surrogacy means the process of carrying and delivering a child for another person. Thus, a surrogate mother is a woman who bears a child on behalf of another woman, either from her own eggs or from the implantation in her womb of a fertilized egg from another woman. Commercial surrogacy involves an agreement which includes monetary compensation to the surrogate mother, along with the medical expenses associated with the pregnancy. Altruistic surrogacy focuses on providing no monetary compensation to the surrogate mother. A child born out of a surrogacy procedure will be deemed to be the biological child of the intending couple. An abortion of the surrogate child requires the written consent of the surrogate mother and the authorization of the appropriate authority. The certificate of eligibility will be issued to the Indian couple married for at least 5 years, between 23 to 50 years old wife and 26 to 55 years old husband, and they should not have any surviving child. Surrogacy clinics cannot undertake surrogacy-related procedures unless they are registered by the appropriate authority. And for discussing the impact of this crucial legislation, I'm joined by a very illustrious panel. Joining us, Ms. Vandana Chavan. She is Rajya Sabha member from the NCP. She is joining us from Maharashtra through virtual platform. Also joining us, Dr. Nayana Patel, IVF specialist. She's also joining us from Gujarat. And in the studio, we have with us Dr. R.K. Srivastava, former Director General of Health Services, Government of India. Also joining us in the studio is a very vibrant audience of young professionals. I welcome all of you on Sunset TV and thank you so much for joining us. And before we commence our discussion, let's take a look at how our parliamentarians debated this bill.
बहुत से ऐसे लोग हैं जो चाहते हैं कि वो इसको एक बिजनेस बना लें और इस माध्यम से बच्चा पैदा करके वो बिजनेस कमा करके पैसा कमाए, और लेकिन सरकार की जो मंशा है, सरकार की मंशा है कि इसको परोपकार की भावना से इस सरोगेसी को बच्चे को पैदा किया जाए.
Because when the clinics are formed, there must be good infrastructure facilities. That is very important. Without that, the clinics cannot conduct this kind of treatment and give the facilities.
This kind of psychological mental condition which doesn't appear to be, doesn't appear to show up, which may not even get detected easily, whether that tocophobia is covered under the provisions of infertility.
I think that such services will only be available to Indian married couples who have been married for about 5 years and do not have a child of their own. This means that all those who are not married, single people, live in couples, those who cannot get married, trans and queer persons of couples cannot access surrogacy. This is highly discriminatory.
For the safety and security for the women, the government is well thought. The ministry has planned to give benefits for this bill so that it helps the women of this country with security, sir.
महिला परिणित ही होनी चाहिए, विवाहित ही होनी चाहिए, जिंदगी में उसका कॉमर्शलाइजेशन ना हो जाए. यहाँ कई सम्मानीय सदस्यों ने कहा कि एक देश में बड़ा कारोबार होगा, इंडस्ट्रीज खड़ी होगा. माननीय अध्यक्ष महोदय, ये इंडस्ट्रीज नहीं है और नहीं इंडस्ट्रीज उसको कभी बनाना चाहिए. ये नहीं देश की इनकम का साधन होना चाहिए. ये मातृत्व धारण करने का विषय है. जिस दंपति जो संतान नहीं है, वो संतान पैदा करना चाहते हैं, मातृत्व धारण करना चाहते हैं, फैमिली बनाना चाहते हैं, उसके लिए सरोगेसी है।
And Mr. Chavan, let me begin the program with you. More than a decade, several drafts, parliamentary committees, and finally, the legislative process concluded. I do recall when this bill was debated in Parliament, there were concerns on single parents, transgenders, and live-in couples to be included in the ambit of commissioning parents. But since you've been very closely involved in the legislative process, take us through the journey of this act.
You're absolutely right, Kriti, that this bill has been long awaited. People and even other doctors who run clinics were patiently waiting that some kind of rules and regulations should come in from the government side. And finally, it has happened, which I'm very happy about. Yes, in fact, we have to be proud about that. In October 1978, we had our first test tube baby, and that is the time that India really realized that we have the expertise for assisted use of technology for reproductive rights. And it's since then that there has been mushrooming of several clinics, several agencies which have been involved in all kinds of assisted technologies for reproduction. But unfortunately, there was no law. In 2005, it was for the first time that the ICMR, the Indian Council for Medical Research, came out with certain guidelines which really were very positive to give a direction to the doctors and the clinics as to how these cases should be dealt with. In fact, the government also time and again has proposed since 2008, 2010, 2013, 2014, the government came out with several regulations for different reasons, and even at one time to exclude prospective parents on the basis of marital status or sexual orientation or their citizenship. So it has been a continuous process. It was for the first time in 2016 that actually a bill was tabled in the Lok Sabha, and by this time there was deliberation in the Lok Sabha. The Lok Sabha decided to refer this to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Health and Family Welfare. The committee came out with its report in August 2017. In fact, it was a U-turn from the existing content of the bill. It was very proactive, a very positive kind of suggestion, recommendations that came from the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Health and Family Welfare. But unfortunately, the recommendations were not followed when the bill came up for deliberations in the Lok Sabha. And it was passed there and then sent to the Rajya Sabha. After it came to the Rajya Sabha again, there was a recommendation that this should go to a standing committee, of which I happened to a select committee, sorry, of which I happened to be a member. Yes. We went to several places, visited clinics, visited intending parents. We met surrogate mothers. There were a lot of myths in our minds, which also were addressed to through our questions to the stakeholders. And ultimately, the select committee came out with its report in February 2020. In fact, based on the recommendation of this report, the bill in the Rajya Sabha was passed on 8th of December 2021. That's recently in this winter session. And because it had a lot of changes made, recommendations were included, it was sent back to the Lok Sabha for its assent. And this is how this has been a long journey. And I'm happy that I realize that there are certain gray areas or even unaddressed areas in this bill. But I think it's a good beginning, and there is something concrete that people and the clinics can look forward to by way of rules and regulations, and also for the stakeholders, whether it's the surrogate mother or the intending parents.
Absolutely. You said it's a good beginning, and you also used a very important term, mushrooming clinics. Let me take that to Dr. Patel. Dr. Patel, a UN-backed study conducted in July 2012 put the surrogacy business at over $400 million with more than 3,000 fertility clinics all over the country. Foreign nationals who wanted to escape tough surrogacy laws in their own countries used to come to India in search of poor and vulnerable women. And they were used for renting their wombs. Certainly, this legislation will go a long way in checking this kind of exploitation.
Uh, Thank you, Preeti. But I would say that yes, it is a very welcome law and regulation that we all were looking forward to. But I also would like to comment on a few things. Like it is, supposing we say that we'll stop the foreign nationals, agreed. But exploitation, in a way, we can say cannot be regulated by making it a very strict and stringent law. Because my worry is that if we say that it is totally altruistic, and there is no, like even UK, they have altruistic surrogacy, but there, over and above the medical expenses, there are expenses given to the surrogates in the, because they are losing their wages, they have to take help of the caretakers at home to take care of their children. So there will be some expense that they will be having over and above the medical expenses, and that is being allowed there. So in a similar way, they have used a nice frame in the recent law, that is the bill that is passed, that over and above the medical expenses, prescribed expenses can be given to the surrogate, and that should be elaborated further, and that should be a reasonable package, so that the surrogates also get their wages and loss of hours that they are doing, and at the same time they are not getting exploited, and they will come forward to help an infertile couple. It's not within the family. So for somebody coming from outside, that much, we don't call it compensation, but yes, compensation for their loss of wages, their health and nutrition, their postnatal care, while they are pregnant and taking care of that baby inside, what happens to their children, somebody taking care of them, somebody taking them to school. So all these expenses should be added. This is the main concern. And yes, foreigners coming to India now, look, foreigners are stopped since 6 years almost. 2015, they had stopped foreigners from coming to India.
Yes.
Even after that, there are a lot of Indian couples also who need surrogacy.
Right.
So this surrogacy, if it is allowed this way, I feel that it will not go underground, and all the stakeholders, the surrogates, the intended parents, and the clinics will feel protected with this law.
All right, that's again a very valid point that you're making, ma'am. Dr. Srivastava, coming to you now. Fashion surrogacy is in vogue. How do you think this act will regulate fashion surrogacy in our country?
Really, this is a term probably not written in the law,
Yes.
but this is a very commonly used term, and it speaks volumes about the process in developing a law which is acceptable to all the stakeholders in the country. You will recall that it has taken 40 years
Yes.
to come to this position. And a medical procedure developed 40 years back, which is useful to those couples who are not having issues, will gradually grow because it is fulfilling the demand. And during this period, it has gone. It has grown like anything. Madam has just now said what is the business size and what are the numbers of the clinics which are over here in India. Naturally, they were not regulated. And when we talk about these unregulated clinic and try to link the term fashion surrogacy,
Yes.
we have to try to look at the social section of the population which are using these type of services. It is a high cost service. It is being used by those persons who are bracketed high as far as their bank balance is concerned. And they include all those who are distributed into the social strata where traits are very important.
Yes.
I don't want to marry. Why should I create a baby for myself? The lady will say, I don't want to disturb my figure. Let us go to somebody and who will try to take care of it. And this is what actually the fashion surrogacy you are talking about.
Yes.
This is on increase. A system has been developed which is unethical, probably unregulated, and need to be taken care of if it has got, the law has got enough strength in the hand. in this concern, if you try to look at the present law, there are certain provisions which can limit it. But it all depends upon the development of the various type of list of the payment which can be made, various type of criterias which can be included within the eligibility certificates and the essentiality certificates like gestational surrogacy.
Yes.
All those things are so relevant that unless and until we have got a system of cross-checking all these things before a person is allowed to hire a surrogate mother and go for a baby, this fashion surrogacy probably will try to wriggle into the system in some or other way. I'm not very sure.
All right, so there has to be strict implementation of the law. That's what you're saying. But let's talk about global practices in surrogacy. In Ireland, Denmark, Belgium, South Africa, Australia, Canada, and Greece, only altruistic surrogacy is allowed. Commercial surrogacy is legally allowed in countries like Rajya, Ukraine, and Thailand. In France, Germany, Spain, Sweden, Italy, and Iceland, surrogacy is banned in all forms. Mr. Chavan, what are the best global practices incorporated in this law to suit Indian needs?
Yeah, so this entire field of assisted reproductive technologies is still evolving. And it has evolved in some of the developed countries, but there also you see that countries like, as you've just mentioned, France, Germany, all very advanced countries, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Bulgaria, they prohibit all forms of surrogacy. So even in such kind of countries, surrogacy doesn't happen at all. In fact, countries where surrogacy happens, but it is altruistic, is UK, Ireland, Denmark, Belgium, again, very advanced countries, but it is limited to altruism. Some of the states which in the US have excelled in the treatment through surrogacy. India is also considered one of the very developed and advanced kind of system where we have some very good clinics, some very good doctors who can address this efficiently. Of course, the rules and regulations were very much required, and they are now in place to make sure that it is done in a very ethical manner and in a very transparent manner, which was very important. So I think some states of US, India itself, Thailand, Ukraine, and Russia, I believe, is also countries where surrogacy happens in a big way. Yes. But I'm not really sure whether it is, fully in the ethical way, and whether there are rules and regulations to make sure that it happens in the proper way. But I'm sure India is on that path. In fact, at one point of time, India was called the, we were talking about fertility tourism. Yes. That's how people abroad looked at India, that here is the technology, here there are doctors, here there is expertise, and therefore we could go to India. Of course, there was another reason that we are very, very cheap compared to the other countries. Absolutely. But all at the same time, the expertise is very much there. And therefore, at this point of time, it's very difficult to say which is the best governed country as far as surrogacy is concerned. But I think with these rules and regulations, we are moving in that direction.
All right. So now that we have rules and regulations in place, Dr. Patel, how do we establish a code of conduct for surrogacy clinics and ensure right to privacy of the donor as well as of the surrogate mother?
Look, the privacy part will not be that secretive now because the couple has to go to the appropriate authority with the certificate saying they need surrogacy, and they have to go with a surrogate mother with the eligibility criteria that she fulfills it. So it's out in the open. Even if they don't want to tell anyone, the couples or the surrogate, it's out in the open. They have to go openly to the appropriate authority and do it. But in this process, at least the eligibility criteria will be fulfilled, and the right person is doing surrogacy, and the right surrogate is becoming the surrogate mother. That is established. But the 5 years clause and a certificate saying loudly that I'm infertile, I don't have a uterus, or my body condition is such that I need surrogacy, I have got this disease, is, I think, a little bit too much on the couple to come out and declare in the open. And also for the surrogate to go to the appropriate authority and prove that I'm eligible to do surrogacy will not keep it very secretive. Transparency, yes, it will be there because all the papers will be in place. Nobody can do it, surrogacy, nobody can exploit the surrogate. That is also there. But very stringent, what Dr. Srivastava said, yes, implementation should be there and a proper implementation should be there. But at the same time, they should move forward fast and it should be seen that the central board or the national board or wherever the couple is going, they should say that this will remain very confidential.
And before I take questions from our audience, Mr. Chavan, quickly, for surrogacy to happen, we need embryos, and embryos are cultured in various IVF labs. So, assisted reproductive technology bill has also been passed by Parliament during the last session. This would prove to be a game changer in ensuring reproductive rights. Your comments, ma'am?
Absolutely, Kriti. In fact, when we were working on in the select committee on the surrogacy bill, this was one of the points that came in front of us. And it was absolutely required that first the ART bill needs to come in and then the surrogacy, because surrogacy is a part of the ART procedures. And therefore, rightly so, both the bills have been brought together, the ART and the surrogacy bill, because they're both very much interconnected. In fact, the surrogacy bill, I would say, is a subset of the ART bill, and rightly so, it has come together. So that was something which was the topmost recommendations of the select committee, and it has happened.
All right, time for some questions of our audience.
Don't you think that putting a ban on anything, or maybe putting a ban on commercial surrogacy, is something very extreme, and it will lead to the underground practices of the same, and who will be there to check these practices, these illegal practices of commercial surrogacy?
Dr. Srivastava, would you like to take that?
Saying that allowing anybody and everybody to go and tell the intending couple that they are available for surrogacy may be really not very health friendly, because when they try to have a mother which is identified as a surrogate mother, they look for two things. First is the money and second is the health. So money is also important. It depends upon the pocket, because sterility and the requirement of baby is not limited to certain section of the society. It is cutting across all the section of the society.
Yes.
So that may not be very type of healthy practice. The second thing is that if there is a permission for every woman to allow for it, then there may be so many other type of practices which are socially not acceptable.
Time for last two questions. Let's take them together.
My question is that according to Article 14 and 21, right to life or right to equality, is that possible a single woman or a widow woman be a single parent through surrogacy or IVF?
What about the maternity relief the women is getting after surrogacy? It's not mentioned anywhere in surrogacy.
All right, that's a very important question. Mr. Chavan, would you like to answer that? What about maternity relief?
She must be entitled for that. In fact, that should be made sure that it comes in the rules. In fact, even about the earlier questions which were put, I'm glad Sir has already answered them. But I think there is a gap as far as single women. Why can't they why can't they adopt surrogacy procedures? That is something that, when I said there are some unaddressed areas, I would say that is one. As far as the men are concerned, the adoption law doesn't allow a man to adopt. So the same criteria has been applied here, which is okay. I think even for transgender and later for single women, it has to be made open, but that I think will come the course of time. Maternity leave absolutely is very much required. And the three things which the surrogate mother has to get is a good insurance cover. Secondly, she has to be covered with medical expenses. And thirdly, as Dr. Patel has already said, prescribed expenses. Now, the prescribed expenses is a very wide term. And I hope that, it entails and it includes several factors as to loss of work, the well-being, the upkeep of the women. A lot of women also go through postpartum depressions. So who addresses these issues, if at all they go through? So all these need to be addressed. And I think in the course of time, through the rules made for this act, I'm sure these issues should be addressed, or rather will be addressed. Let us hope for the best.
Dr. Patel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that this was a very welcome move and a good step to go ahead with the regulations so that all of us feel protected, from doctors, clinics to surrogate mothers and the couples, and we have a proper bill which we can follow. But at the same time, we will need a lot of explanation and elaboration on certain clauses which are still not fully understood, and anybody can read in between the lines and can take it whichever way they feel.
So as we'll move ahead, I'm sure we'll have clarity. And as we know that surrogacy is a blessing for many childless couples, the Act tries to ensure that while childless couples get what they want, nobody, included the surrogate mother and the children born out of surrogacy, suffer. On that note, thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Chavan, Dr. Patel and Dr. Srivastava. Next week, we'll return with incisive analysis of another important bill. Till then, take care and stay tuned to Sunset TV. Namaskar.